Okay, so I've got my glue here. Start applying it to the top section first. Just put the first piece into place. I just want to make sure that the straight edges at least are lined up. Into place. And once I've got all three pieces on, I'll use my clamps, all three sections rather. I'll use clamps to hold it all together. A little panel into place now. And that was the bit I chipped there, so I actually want that face down and over that way, because then I might actually trim that off. So I can just feel a little bit of an overhang along that side. I want to make sure as well that I've got a nice straight edge in there, because I don't want anything to hinder the door. Again, I want to get this bit lined up so it's flush with the inside edge of the door, and then I'll trim away anything over that side. And if you're wondering why I've got the strut there and there it's covered, it's just because my struts weren't level. They were all just put in freehand, so I didn't line them up at all. And you don't have to, it's just to add some structure and strength to your frame, so you don't have to make them even at all. That final piece. Okay, getting that lined up on the inside of the door there. Right, I'm going to clamp this, but I'm just going to put some masking tape over those central joins there. So even though I sanded that strip down, that piece is still sort of trying to push upwards, so I'm going to stick it down. Press that flat and put a piece of tape across there like that. I'm going to put these all the way around the outside. And I like to place them sort of right over the join like that, so they're sort of actually sitting halfway between any join. Oh, excuse me. That was a delivery of a new cabinet to actually stand my doll's house on. Having a bit of a change around out there in the dining room. And I wanted a smaller cabinet so I can move it over into the corner. Once I've got that all set up, I'll show you. Might mean having a change around of some of the sort of bits and pieces that I keep in that cupboard. So I'll let you know what I do as well. Try and get a couple into the sort of door opening as well. Get one on there. I'm running out of smaller ones now. I don't know if I'll get another one up there, will I? Oh, yep. Just sneak that in there. Just wanted to hold the corner of that panel down. More smaller ones in there. I just want to put again over those joins. Have I got one more? Got a few more in the bottom there. That one there. Perfect. Another one along that bottom edge. Clamp as well as you can. As far as I'm concerned, you can never add too many clamps. And then you know you've got a nice solid structure once the glue has dried. These ones are really good, really strong. Always make sure they are actually clamped before you let go of them as well. Otherwise you might find that they ping up and fly into your face, which isn't nice. Ooh! And there as well. So I'm now going to leave that to dry, and then once I remove the clamps I can go around the outside and inside that door opening and trim away any overhanging sheet wood, and then we'll go and try it into place just to make sure. So I'll see you in a bit. Okay, so I left that drying for a good couple of hours before I removed the clamps. So now I can turn it over and go along these edges and just trim away anything that's overhanging, and that's the worst bit there in that sort of second panel. So I'm going to have to turn it that way to do it. So let me move the camera around. And I've got a new blade in my knife, and I'm just going to trim along the edge of the strip there, keeping my blade flat along the edge of the strip. And I'll sand this as well once it's done to make sure I have got nice flush edges. And it's just a question of working your way around and trimming along wherever you've got any overhangs. And I have actually got a little bit of an overhang along this bottom edge as well. So let me come along there as well. I'm sort of angling the knife in very slightly along this bottom edge because I know we're going to have the skirting along the front edge. So it's not that I'm going to be leaving any sort of uneven edges or jagged edges. Yeah. And a little bit along that side as well. Looks fine along the top there. So the next bit is to come along and just do the inside edge of that door, and I want to do that because I want obviously to put the pin hinge in this strip. Sorry, because the camera's the other side I can't tell if I'm in or not. Yeah, so I want to put the pin hinge into this strip up here, so I want that bit in there to be nice and flush, so I'll trim that out as well. So I'll just follow along the angle of the side bit there, like that, and then just trim out that tiny little piece up there. Another snip down there should do it, like that. It's not quite straight, so I'll just go in from the other angle. Sorry you can't see what I'm doing. So just tidied that up like that, and then if I turn that around, that looks nice and neat along there. So I now want to go along this other inside edge of the door there. And that wasn't all the way down, it was just in that section there. That feels quite smooth if I run my finger along. Like I said before, I will sand it, and I also don't want to lip at the bottom of the door there, as we'll have problems closing or opening and closing our door. Let me just get in there like that. So just work your way around, make sure you've got nice flush edges everywhere, and then we can sand those edges as well. Just noticed a bit at the bottom that side as well. Okay, so I'm going to now give all of these edges a sand, and I'll just use a piece of sandpaper in my hand. I won't use the block for this because I just want to go over it roughly just to make sure I've got all of those edges off, and then I want to go and try it into place. So that fits in there really nicely. Let me come around this side as well. And bear in mind that it will be back about 3mm from that front edge. So I've positioned it that far back, roughly anyway. So now I can take that back to my desk and start building the door. So I'm going to be using 2.5mm sheet for my door, and that's 3/32 of an inch. So I've checked that I've got a nice straight edge along the top and one side, and I'm actually going to turn the door, or turn the wall upside down on it, and actually draw around the door opening to get the actual measurement of my door. So I'm just making sure that that's laid on there, straight along that little line at the top, and then straight down this side here. And I'm just leaving a tiny little hair's width gap around the edge. And then I've got my sharp pencil here, so I'll draw around the angle on the other side and along the bottom there. And then I'm going to cut that out, and then before I apply the mouldings I'll try it in place, and if it needs any adjustments then I can just do some gentle sanding. But when you're making an angled door, the best way to actually measure and cut it is to actually use the door opening. Okay, so let's get this cut out. So I'll go straight along that bottom edge first, so we've just got a nice neat piece of wood to work with. I've got a fairly new blade in my knife. I've only done a little bit of cutting with it, so that should be okay. So a nice light score to start, in a little bit deeper. With a thicker piece of wood, I just like to chip away the edges of the wood as well. Piece can go back in the box, and then I'm going to cut across the other straight line, and then we'll worry about the angle. And I'm sort of going just on the inside edge of that other line, and again that will provide just a little bit of, well, give really, so that the door's not going to be too tight. And the beauty of it is as well, when you're adding mouldings, is that if you do cut away a little bit too much, you can then sort of fill that in with your moulding, so you would just have the moulding slightly overhanging. But hopefully we're going to have a nice fit here. And again, I'm placing the rule just below that angle line as well. And I'm cutting against the grain here, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult than that last cut. So let's put those pieces to one side and just try that into place. That sort of feels quite nice already. So a little bit tall at the top, and I'm not worried about the lines or the sort of gaps around the edges there. because I'd rather have that than have it too tight. But I do just need to cut a little bit extra away at that top. But as a first go, I'm quite happy with that. So let me just trim a little bit away from that top edge. And I'm just going to do it by eye. And I really am just going to take, I don't know, sort of 1/2 millimetre, and then I'll try it again. And if it's still too tight, I'll take some more. But it's always better just to take a little bit at a time and then take some more if you need to. Let's try that in there again. Yep, I'm quite happy with that. I'm going to sand around the cut edges just to smooth that off, and then we'll get the mouldings cut. So I've got my little plan here again, and I've just designed the mouldings on the door. So keeping it simple, as you can see, I'm just going to have a moulding around each edge, and then I'm going to have one across, it's not quite the centre, but across that area there in line with the one across the actual wall, and then I'll put the little doorknob on there. I think that will look quite nice. So I've cut myself plenty of strips, and this is from 1.5mm sheet wood, 1/16 of an inch, and I've cut them 5mm wide, 13/64 of an inch. And I'm going to begin by adding the mouldings to the door, and then I'm going to drill the holes for the pin hinges and get the door dry fitted before I apply the rest of the mouldings. So I'm going to begin with my straight edge, and I'm actually going to cut the mouldings against the door. So lay the moulding into place like that, and then just make a little line with your craft knife. So you're not cutting through, you're just making a little score, and then move it away from your door and cut the moulding. And I'm going to do the same along this side. Because I've got the angle, I'm going to sort of ignore the angle, so line it up along the straight edge at the bottom, and then I'm just going to make the little mark straight across a couple of millimetres above, and then I'll glue that into place, and then I'll turn it over and cut away the excess. So apply glue to the back of the moulding, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to stretch my fingers that way, I always check each side of the moulding to see which one is the nicest. If you've got any little sort of nicks in the wood, or you know, any knots or anything like that, then stick that down. You should always make sure you've got the nicest side facing forward. I'll stick that into place along there. Make sure you've got that nice flush edge along the side, and we will be rounding this edge as well. And when you're making doors, that always helps the door to open and close more smoothly. So press that down like that. I'll be fixing clamps as well once we've got all of these into place. Again, checking for the nicest edge. And then stick that into place so it's flush along the bottom and side edge. Just use your fingers, make sure you've got a nice flush edge along there. And this is the time to have a think about if you had any gaps around the edge of your door that you wanted to cover with your mouldings. Just try your door into place and make a note of where you need to have the moulding slightly overhanging. And I'm going to then turn that upside down like that, hold on to it nice and tightly, and then cut along the edge of that moulding, following the angle of the door, like that. I'm then going to do the top and bottom mouldings nice and straight, so nice and easy. Just line that up in there. Again, make your little score where you need to cut, and then move the moulding away and cut away from your door. That's just so you don't go jabbing your knife into your door. Check for the nicest edge. place. Again, make sure you've got a nice flush edge along the bottom there. And then I'm going to measure in the same way again for that top edge. So I'm just going to line it up like that. I need to turn it that way around so I can hold on to it. And then just make the cut sort of a couple of millimetres away. Nicest edge check. Again, glue so you've got a nice flush edge along the top. I think I lifted it up then. Turn, press down on it and then cut away the excess. And if you want to leave it to dry off a little bit before you attempt this, then you can do that. I'm just sort of racing on for the purposes of the video. And now we've got our angle to cut. And what we're going to do is line it up again. And again, we're going to just make those little marks with our knife. So I've lined it up. Let me see if I can hold that up. Along the edge like that. So you've got overlapping strip on each of those fixed strips like that, and then we're just going to do our little line following this one up there, so we'll be cutting that away at an angle and then following this moulding along there. And again, these aren't exact angles, that's why we can't just do it with our mitre cutter. So again, make your line, and I'm following the line of the moulding with the edge of the blade, and I'm going to keep that in place and then make that line as well, or make that mark, and then cut away from the door. And I'm going to just try this before I put the glue on, just to make sure. You cut in 2 angles, so it might be that we need to do a little bit of adjusting. Let's see how that fits in there. Oh, it actually fits quite nicely in there, so I'll glue that into place. Okay, make sure you're following the line of the door there. You can always bring in a piece of strip wool or something to press against that if you rather. A bit of glue stuck in there. And now I'm just going to bring in the wall, because I need to work out where that central moulding is going to be. So once the door's in place, remember I was using the mouldings to cover up all of my joins. So the moulding will be along there on the actual wall, right across the centre of that line. And then I'm going to bring my pencil in again and just draw a little line underneath where I need to place the moulding. Make sure that my door's sitting straight. And what I can then do is actually put the door into position while I attach those mouldings, so that I get that nice straight line. And again, I'm going to measure that across the door like that. Make my line. And then glue that into place. I'm just going to bring in my smaller rule and make sure that I've got that straight, just in case I did have my pencil line slightly off. So that's 71.5, and 172, so that needs to go up a little bit that side. Press that down, and then I'm just going to bring in my clamps now and clamp all of those into place. I like to place the clamps over the joins, like I said, for the wall as well. And then that can be left to dry. So before I actually start fitting the mouldings to the wall, as I said earlier, I want to drill the holes for the pin hinges. So the door mouldings are now completely dry. So the door will actually sit sort of slightly raised forward like that, so that the mouldings on the door will be level with the mouldings actually on the wall. So my door, so if I ignore the thickness of the mouldings, the 1.5, my door is 2.5 millimetres. So I then want to go back just over 1 millimetre from the edge of the door opening. So I'm going to actually drill the holes into the wall first. Let me just see if I can prop that up with my glue there. And I've got here in my pin drill my 0.75mm bit, but you just want to choose your smallest bit that's going to be about the same thickness as a dressmaking pin, which is what I'm going to be using for the pin hinges. And I'm just actually going to do this by eye. So I know I've got 1.5mm there, so I want to come back just before that piece of wood ends, and I'm going to come in by about 1.5 as well, and again I'm going to do that all by eye. So it's quite tricky when you're trying to drill into a small space, but keep your drill as upright as you can. And I have actually gone right through the wood there, so I've got the hole underneath, which is what I want, so that I can push the pin hinge up there and into the bottom of the door. And then I want to do the same in this top area. So I just want to measure actually how much I did come in, and it was just over 1.5, so in between 1.5 and 2 millimetres. So I want to keep that distance the same, just so that my door will be even. So I'm just going to make a little pencil mark in there. And it's quite difficult to hold on to these pieces like this. So that's where I want it to come in from. And then I'm going to go back again just before the edge of that 1.5mm thick wood. So I'm drilling at a slight angle, but I should still be able to push my pin in nice and straight, as long as you don't split through the wood. So what I want to do now is round one long edge of the door, and then I can fit it into place and make the little pinholes actually in the door, and then get those drilled as well. So to actually round off the edge of the door, I'm going to hold it against a sheet of sandpaper on my desk, and this is a 180 grade, holding it at a bit of an angle, and then I'm going to sweep it towards me and bring it into an upright position. I find that 5 sweeps is usually about enough, and then I do the same amount of sweeps on the other side. Like that. And then if you look from that bottom edge there, you can see that that's just very slightly rounded off, and that's all you'll need to make the door open and close smoothly in the opening. Okay, so to dry fit the door, just take one of the dressmaking pins and just snip off the head of the pin. Now if you haven't got a hole at the top where you can put your pin all the way through, you might just want to snip the pin in half. So you just want it so that you can push the pin into place, and so that you'll have a bit sticking out to sort of poke into the top of your door. So I'll just pop that there like that, and then if I show you from behind, I've got plenty sort of overhanging there at the top that I can then push down into the top of the door. We're just making some little indentations in the door at this stage. So I just want to put the door then into place, bearing in mind that it will be overhanging the wall by about 1.5 millimetres. well, not even about exactly 1.5, the thickness of the moulding, like that, and then take a second pin, I can't actually get it to stay in there, push that up through the hole we made in the bottom there, and poke that into the bottom of the door. Let me just try and get it a little bit lined up. There, that's holding in there now. So I'm just holding it there so that overhanging is the thickness of the moulding, so then it will be flush with the mouldings actually on the wall, like that. And then push the pin in, but only so you're making a little indentation, you're not sort of trying to push it all the way into the door. And then I think I've pushed that one at the top all the way through, but that's okay because I can then go around the back there. And I'll just get my tweezers to do that and push that one down. But see what I mean, if you haven't got a space where the whole of the pin can come through like that, then just cut sort of half a pin and just make sure that you don't push it all the way up. So I'm just trying to push that into the top of the door, and I can actually see through the gap there that that is going into the top of the door. I just want to make sure that it's making the indentation. So that's holding in place nicely there, so I know that those pins are in the right place. So if you then remove the pins, let me see if I've got that little indentation in the top. Yep, I did just get that there. I shouldn't be using the tip of my tweezers to do that, but just because they were closest to hand, I'm just going to make that little mark a little bit deeper. So that's where I'll drill the hole in that one, and then I've got a nice little hole in the bottom there to drill that one. So I'm going to just set up my desk vise and drill the holes in this door. And I couldn't film that because actually my doll's house is in the way, so I couldn't get the camera in to film me drilling the holes. But I'm sure you've seen me do that before. And then I'm just pushing a pin into each of those holes, and again you can check that you've gone deep enough by just putting your thumbnail at the top of the pin there. And the same there, and you want to go down by about 1/4 of an inch, and I've gone a little bit more, so that's fine. So I'm now going to put the door to one side, and that's ready for paint. And as with any piece of furniture, I like to paint the door and the main sort of unit, or in this case the wall, separately, because then you can get right along the edges and you're not going to have any bare wood showing. So I'm going to put that to one side and bring the wall back in. I've just realised as well that on my drawing I didn't do any mouldings down the edge, so along that straight edge there and along the angled edge there, so I will be putting mouldings down those edges as well, and then that will tie in nicely with the edge of the stairs and with the wall on that right hand side. So I'm going to begin with the skirting board, and I'm going to cut it in a similar way as we did with the angled door strip. So I want to just place that so that the corner of the skirting board is in the right place, and then I'm going to make a tiny little mark at the top following that angle, and I'm actually going to see if that will fit nicely into my handheld mitre cutter. It might just be a nice angle. But if I look along there like that, it needs to go from the line to that corner, and it's just slightly off. So again, I'm going to have to cut that by hand. This is quite a thick piece of wood as well. So what I'm going to do is just begin by using the blade to mark out where I want to cut like that. And just really carefully use the tip of the knife to cut through. Keep the knife as upright as you can so that you're not sort of cutting an angle, you know, in the thickness of the wood. Actually, it's quite soft wood, this skirting board. I think it might be basswood, so that was quite easy to cut. Let's bring the wall back in. can line that up. And make a little pencil mark on the front at the straight edge. And I know I'm going to be able to cut this with my cutters, like that. Now I want to turn it over and draw again on the inside of the door. And I'm just holding onto it really tightly, but what you can do is put a little bit of masking tape on the front edge to hold that into place while you draw around the inside of the door, if you're sort of worried that it's going to move around. So now I need to cut that piece out. And again, I'm going to do it as I would cut any section out from a piece of wood, and begin by making those little nicks in the wood. Which helps to keep your blade on track. And as usual, you want to cut against the grain of the wood first. And really I'm just sort of chipping into it with the tip of the knife, just because it's so thick. Be careful of your fingers, be really careful, always be thinking, where are your fingers in relation to the blade? This is not a job you want to be doing and sort of let your mind wander. Not like you can when you're painting or sanding. And then for the straight cut, you can bring your rule back in and cut as normal. I think I'm actually just going to get another piece of skirting and prop that up. So if you bring in another piece like that, then your rule isn't going to sort of tip off the end. And I'm just using the rule just because it would be difficult to hold on to with my fingers and just cut sort of freehand like that. So again, nice and slow with your first cut. As you can see there, the second piece of skirting I've brought in isn't quite as thick as the first piece, and you will find that as well. There's always going to be a tolerance in sheetwood or skirting or anything like that. Well, I've managed to make those first couple of cuts with it in place, so that's fine. I don't think that was completely cut through. And never pull it out, always make sure that it's cut free before you sort of try to remove it. And there's that, and I can just use a piece of 500 grade sandpaper to tidy up those edges. But that looks quite nice. Let's get these out of the way. So as I did with the door, I'm just going to go along and sort of glue and then measure and cut and glue again, and just sort of build it up like that. It's so much easier to measure your next moulding when you've got the first one already in place. I think I just need a little bit more glue on my card. Okay, make sure that's sitting right along the bottom edge, so that you've got a nice flush edge. Otherwise you'll find that your wall will be too tall to fit back under your stairs. It's important that you always make sure you've got those flush edges. I'm just going to grab another cocktail stick there, get rid of that bit of glue along the top edge. Okay, so I've got a couple of longer strips here to start the vertical mouldings on the edge. Line that up like that, nice straight one to start, nice and easy. And again, I'm doing exactly the same thing, holding it in place and then making the little score with the knife and then cutting it. And keep all of your little offcuts at this stage, because you might find that they'll come in handy for those smaller pieces. And I've got my plan here as well to my left, so I can keep referring to that. And then the next one, I want actually going up alongside the door like that. And if you don't want to do sort of strips as I'm doing here, you can create some panels. So you can cut some shapes in your wood, either squares, or shape them to the angle of your stairs, and then just bevel the edges and do it like that. Make it look a little bit different. So my next straight one is along the other side of the door. I'm going to hold that in place, and I'm actually going to make the mark across the angle there. Not quite straight, I think I pushed that out as I went upwards. Score there, and then cut that away from the wall. And when you're cutting like that, an angle in it, you need to find your nicest side first. Once you've cut the angle, you have to stick it that way around. But luckily, that was my nicest side. My next upward bit is about here, and then I've got a small vertical piece down there as well. So let me just make a measurement across there and further up as well, so that I first of all get a straight line, and then that I'm positioning them, leaving sort of even panels. And you probably don't have to do all that, you can just do it by eye. So what have I got there? 142 minus 10 for the 2 strips is 132 divided by 3. So I'll do a little pencil mark there, and then that will be my strip, and then another 43, and then my next strip will be there. So I then want to make a pencil mark further up, again 43mm away from this line. So it will actually go to the edge there. So my next strip will sit along there like that, and then I've got even sort of panels in there. And that will go there like that. And that strip sits quite nicely on top of that skirting board. The skirting board's a little bit thicker, but that blends in quite nicely. So that's all of my vertical ones apart from the one along that edge, and I'll do that one first, or do those pieces first, because then I'll need to get the exact measurement going across. So again, do as we did with the door and that little angled piece. So hold it in place like that, going along the edge of where it will sit, and then make your little mark like that at both ends of each piece. So I've got one going across there. I'm doing it a little bit keck-handed now, but then I'll want to come down along that straight edge of that first one like that, and that will sit in there. It's slightly long there, so I just need to cut a tiny little bit off. When you're doing angles, it's always better to try them in place before you put the glue on. Make sure I'm putting the glue on the right side, and then continue your way along. I might be able to use the angle from the last cut, so that's handy. So continue to work your way up the angle like that. So I now want to bring the door back in, and I just want to put it in to line up those central mouldings along there so that it's level with the one across the door. So I've got some of these smaller pieces here that I can use. Make sure the door's sitting straight, and then I can get it lined up exactly like that. I can then remove the door and then use that first one as my guide for these next two over here. And again, I've got a little angled piece there I might be able to use. And I'm going to line it up by using my rule almost like a set square, so putting it in with the straight edge along that side moulding, and so that it's then lined up with that one. So I know that one will sit there. I can use that little angled bit and then just trim a straight edge down there. Take that away from the door, from the wall rather. And a nice simple little straight piece across the central one there. I'll just check that before I put the glue on, because I thought I angled the knife a bit. Yes, I did. It's probably good to get into the habit of always checking before you apply the glue, which will save any sort of small gaps. I think it's because I'm trying to work a little bit keck-handedly, so let me just cut that over there. Yes, that's better. And then line that one up with those two. And I'll just bring the rule in again to make sure I'm level with that first one. Like that. So it needs to go up a tiny bit that way. So just continue fitting your horizontal ones across, and I'm going to leave that one across the angle of the door there until last, because I think I've got a little bit of gap in along there that I might like to cover up. So I'll do all the other horizontal mouldings and then we'll come back and have a look at that bit. So all of the mouldings are now fitted, apart from that one just going across the angle of the door there, and I just wanted to leave that until last to see if I've actually got too much of a gap along there. Now the door isn't going to sit right down to the bottom and right over to that side, there still will be a little bit of gap in at the other edges, so I think that's sort of okay. I might overhang the angled moulding there just by a sort of hair's width, just to take away from that gap along there. But as well, remember that's going to be viewed from a sort of angle as well, and from this side of the door, so you're not really going to be able to pick that up too much. But it's just nice to get it as exact as you can. And it's probably a good idea to bring your door in at this stage anyway, because when I come to put my door down, I'd overhung this moulding down here by a little bit too much, and it also didn't go along the top correctly, just because I had to sit these mouldings here a little bit lower down to actually cover the gap between the panels. If I'd have gone higher up so that I could fit the door in, then the gap would have been showing just below the moulding, which didn't look very nice. So I fitted the mouldings to cover the gap between the panels, and then I've just, if you can see, just snipped a little bit out of that one just at the top of the door there, and I sanded a little bit away at this side here just so that the door will fit in nicely. And again, that's not really noticeable. I think that looks quite nice. So with this moulding here, I'm going to do the same thing as I've done before and just overhang it by a tiny little amount. Let's get that one cut now, and then the piece will be ready for paint. I sort of line it up just a little bit lower than the actual line on the wall. Like that, and then if I line that door up, I don't know if I can pick it up actually by the moulding, where it will actually sit, you can see that's just a nice sort of even gap in, around the outside edge there. So I'm really pleased with that. And this is now ready to paint, and as I say, I like to paint the pieces separately so that you can get all around the edges of the door and sort of inside the edge of the wall there, so you haven't got any natural wood showing. And I'm just going to paint it in the same colour that I've done the rest of the entrance halls and landings. So both of those pieces have had one coat of paint. I did the door on both sides, obviously because sometimes I'll want to display that open, but I just did the sort of facing edge of the wall and just along the inside edges of the door. Now it isn't yet dry, so that's why it still looks a bit patchy, but I will give that a sand and a second coat in the morning. And then I want to get the door fitted, and then I can close this episode off, and I won't actually be fitting the wall into place until I've made that cupboard to go inside, so we'll be doing that in the next episode. But it's now 20 to 4 and I'm going to go and walk our neighbour's dog Woody, and I'll see you again in the morning. Woody, you're going to say hello to my YouTube subscribers? Say hello.
Go on.
Go on.
Hello.
Woody, come on, let's put your flashy collar on. Come on. Come on. Let's put your collar on. Can't see him at all. There.
There we go.
Go on then. Go on. So the wall and the door have had 2 coats of paint, and I sanded gently after each coat had completely dried. So now I want to fit the door, and the first thing to do is dry the door into the opening, as after you've applied the paint you might find that it's a little bit tight, and if so you can just sand very gently around the edges. And I've already done mine. And then I want to attach the doorknob, and I'm just going to use this simple little antique brass doorknob. That's got about a 4mm diameter. So I'm just going to make a measurement on the edge of the door there. And I'm just sort of measuring downwards by eye like that. So I've got my 1.5mm bit in the drill there, and I'm just going to drill down through that pencil mark. And I'll just try that into place to make sure it's a good fit. And even though that is sort of nice and tight, I'm going to put a little bit of glue in there, as I usually do, just to make sure it's nice and secure. We're now ready to fit the door, so take a dressmaking pin and just push it into the holes that we drilled into the wall, and that's just to remove any paint that might have got in there. And I've actually already done mine, and do the same in your door as well, into the holes we drilled at the top and bottom. And then use your pliers to cut the end from the first pin. I'm actually going to cut mine in half this time, or just over half. And I want to get the top one in first, just because that's more difficult. So I'm going to push that down from the inside so that I've got the point going into the top of the door. It's quite tight squeeze in there as well. I'll turn that around, and then I'm going to push the pin into the hole we made at the top of the door. Like that. Get the door lined up. And then I can take my second pin and push it through the hole we made in the bottom of the door. So again, that one's a bit bent. I'm going to cut it to about 3/4 in length. I'm not going to push it all the way in yet because I want to just make sure that it is actually going into the hole in the door and not behind it. And sometimes that happens, you think it's gone in nice and easily, when you look at the back and it's actually just on the outside of the door. So make sure it's in the right place. And then just test your door that it opens and closes nicely. And because of what we're actually using this one for, because we want to be able to glance into that cupboard, I want it to open all the way like that. And that's opening quite nicely. So what I can now do is push that bottom pin all the way in. A little bit tight, that's okay. And then have a look at that top pin. And actually see if I can get in there with my tweezers and push that down anymore. My pliers, I mean. I know it's going into the top of the door, but because I didn't drill the hole at an angle, you can see it's angled slightly. So I'm just having trouble getting in there with my pliers, so I will have to bring the tweezers in. I'm just going to have to turn away from the camera a moment so I can get a good grip on it. And then give that a push down, and that did actually go down a little bit there. And don't push it too hard because you don't want to split through the door. That can be really annoying at this stage. But that's given me a nice sturdy pin hinge there, so I'm happy with that. Okay, so now we can go and put this in place. And I am really pleased with that. Obviously it's not glued into place yet, so every time I sort of open and close the door I'm moving it out of place, but I think I've got it just about right because I've sort of lined it up with this line in the flooring, and I'll use that as a guide each time I sort of move it in and out. But let me just open up that door really carefully without moving the wall out of place. So we're going to be able to sort of see just into the cupboard like that, but if we come around into the dining room, and we'll eventually, of course, there'll be doors on here, but we can open the doors and we'll be able to see in a little bit further. So when I do actually make that cupboard, or make those shelves to go in the cupboard, I'll make it so it goes right into that corner that you can see in there. And then if anybody does want to peer in through the dining room doors, the whole area will be filled. And I'm really looking forward to doing those shelves and filling them as well. And a little bit of space in there for our vacuum cleaner. But even if I just used the vacuum cleaner for display, so I could bring that out and maybe stand it in front of the open door. And there's just one more little thing that I want to try before I go. And to create that light in there, I'm using a lovely little LED lantern. I'll show you that. And this is actually one I've bought for the Coastal Homewares shop. So it won't be this one in particular, but I'll get another little LED lantern that I can just switch on and put inside the cupboard when I want to have that door open. And then we'll be able to see all the lovely things we put on the shelves in there. And as I said earlier, we'll be making the shelves and fitting this cupboard in the next episode. And that's really good timing actually, because my battery light's just come on. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode and that you found that tutorial for the understairs cupboard really helpful. Now I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you so much to all of the new subscribers. I'm slowly edging closer to my 20,000 subscribers target, so a very warm welcome to you and thank you so much for being here. So that's it for today. Thank you for watching and I'll see you soon. Bye!